long line of settlers, the land on which I sit is the traditional territory of Oneida Nations of the Thames, the people of Standing Stones. Locally, the territories that are closest to the organizers of this event are, and with deep respect I acknowledge, the Nishnawbe people, also referred to as the Three Fires Confederacy, including the Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi nations, the Haudenosaunee peoples, also known as the Iroquois, Six Nations, including the Mohawk, Oneida, Cayuga, Onondaga, Seneca, and the Tuscarora people, and the Lenape people, also referred to as the Delaware or Munsee. There are 11 First Nation communities in the regions of southwestern Ontario, and we suggest that you reflect on and acknowledge the land on which you are sitting today. Today in the province of Ontario, there are 127 First Nation communities, and 75 of them have boil water advisories. The Nestangaga First Nation, which is in the northern part of our province, is on day 9,605 of a boil water advisory. I believe that we have much to learn to become much better caretakers of the land. I'm both ashamed of my ignorance and empowered by their journey of learning. When I think of the topic tonight on childcare and on parenting, I think of my two sons, one who just recently has become an adult and the other who has just turned 15, both physically able to be parents. I hope that they choose to be parents, that their paths are on one like our speaker's Jeremy, where they choose to be partners in their parenting journey, however that makes sense for their family. It is important for us to understand that the history that has brought us to reside on these Indigenous lands is a long history of broken promises, miseducation, and not listening. The Coalition is committed to learning and furthering truth and reconciliation with our Indigenous neighbors, friends, and community partners. We acknowledge the many withstanding long treaties, relationships between Indigenous nations and Canada, and we recognize that individually and collectively we all have a role to play in demanding that the treaties are honored or that the land goes back, and we need to contribute to reconciliation. It is my opinion, after years of inaction, dirty water, missing daughters, and broken promises, the federal government needs to recompense the First Nations people of Turtle Island. Welcome in Mi'kmaq.
Thank you, Danny. And welcome everyone. Welcome this evening to our speaker event with parenting and gender equality. Tonight, I just want to start off by telling you just a little bit about the Coalition. We actually formed the Coalition in 2019, and we have recently inducted our board, consisting of, so there's myself and Danny Bartlett, who are, and sorry, my name, Linda Davis. And we are the executive directors and facilitating the board in the work that they're going to be doing. So Dr. Amanda Zavitz, Tracy White-Eye, Cindy Marks, Christina Bacra, Jeanette Novak, Melissa Parker, Melissa Milligan, Amanda Topping, Aidan Buchanan St. Giles, David Bilson, Kinga Colton, Matthew Sarita, and Alex Persha. So we, our goal is to limit, undo the limiting stereotypes and beliefs and barriers that stop our individuals from reaching their full potential. And we want to do this through working with government and all entities here in London to manage that. We are hoping to use the lifestyle model to achieve that goal. And in that, by thinking about everything from cradle to grave and how gender stereotyping limits us at every stage of our lives, and how we can remove those barriers and that change the experience and open the potential for everyone who is in our society. Our vision is using a collective voice to create a community where everyone enjoys the opportunities, the responsibilities, and the rewards equally, unrestricted by gender identity. Our plan is to connect with all, like I said, local business, community organizations, municipal governments, school boards, and citizens to identify local barriers to equality, to create strategies for change, and using the collective voice to call for gender justice. So it now gives me great pleasure to introduce to you our moderator for this evening. Sorry, just get my notes here. Jeanette Novak. So Jeanette is a coalition board member, and she is actually the chair of our finance committee. Jeanette hails from the other London, England, and made her way to Canada over 20 years ago, although she hasn't lost her accent, I will say. She is a group benefits insurance advisor by day and a fitness instructor in her free hours. In between, helping people has been her passion since as far as she can remember. Being a mom of two amazing humans, Jeanette is passionate about ensuring that they experience equality and equity in all aspects of their lives. As a member of the Gender Coalition of Ontario, the Gender Equality Coalition, I better say her name right. She has the opportunity to take a deeper dive into the issues and challenges we face in our region around gender equality, and she's very eager to get her boots dirty. So without further ado, I'll turn the mic over now to Jeanette.
Wonderful, thank you. So thank you very much everybody for coming, and it's my pleasure this evening to welcome the three panelists that will be taking a deeper dive into gender equality as it pertains to the family and parenting. And so I'd like to introduce, first of all, our first panelist, who is Marie Clark Walker. She started her career working in a home for the elderly, later with adults and children with developmental disabilities, as a counsellor and a family support worker in Toronto. And once again at the school board as an early childhood educator working with children with disabilities. She rose rapidly through the ranks of the Canadian Union of Public Employees, CUPE, and eventually became CUPE's Ontario Equity Vice President and her union's first ever National Diversity Vice President. Marie made history in 2002 when she was elected as the first racialized woman and youngest person ever elected to the position of Executive Vice President of the Canadian Labour Congress. She served in that position for 5 terms before once again making history in May 2017, being elected as the first ever racialized woman to serve as CLC Secretary Treasurer. She is the mother of 2 sons and a mentor, femtor to many. She has served as a board member on a myriad of organizations, including the Canadian Peace Alliance, the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, Adventure Place, the Scarborough National Malvern Soccer Club, and Scarborough Basketball Association, Juliet's Place, a shelter for abused women and children, the Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety, and as an executive member of the Coalition of Black Trades Unionists. Her passion is just as fervent now as it was when she first became involved in social movements. She continues to fight injustice everywhere she looks and looks forward to the day when Canada is truly a country which celebrates and respects equality and all its diverse and vibrant communities. Our second panelist is Cara Pihlak. Cara is the Executive Director of the Oak Park Children's Centre, a non-profit cooperative childcare centre here in London. She obtained her BA in psychology at Western University in 2015 and early childhood education diploma at Fanshawe in 2016. Quality childcare for our early years population is her passion. Cara seeks to offer an inclusive, engaging, and supportive environment for the staff and children enrolled at the centre. Cara has chaired the advocacy subcommittee through the Licensed Childcare Network, a group of childcare professionals who seek to improve and enhance licensed childcare in the London region. They advocate for a national childcare strategy, as well as quality pay and decent work for our early childhood care professionals. For Cara, quality childcare is a right and not a privilege. And last but certainly not least, our third panelist is Jeremy Carrothers. Jeremy is a husband and father who lives and works in London. He studied creative writing at York University and is currently studying computer science at Ryerson University. He's worked in the nonprofit world since 2002 and brings a uniquely traditional approach to his work and life. He currently works as a communications officer at United Way, Elgin, Middlesex, where he supports the organization's mission for improving lives locally. So welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us. I'm going to ask one question of you all before we get into our main questions, and we'll start in the order that I introduced you. Marie, if you could just let us know what gender equality means to you.
Well, it means justice, because gender equality, if you don't have gender equality, you cannot have justice. Women make up half of the population, yet we continue to face barriers almost in every facet of society. We are underrepresented politically, we're underrepresented at every level of government and decision-making bodies, including the labor movement. The jobs that women traditionally do are underpaid, undervalued, increasingly precarious. We bear the disproportionate burden of unpaid care and domestic work. We experience high rates of sexual and gender-based violence. So working towards gender justice means recognizing that all of these systemic barriers exist, and it's not just enough to promote individual women. We really need to understand gender justice is intersectional. We need to dismantle all the structures and systems that create and perpetuate the injustices that we see. One of my femtors, mentors is Rosemary Brown, and she used to say, you know, until all of us have made it, none of us have made it, and we really need to live that way. We know that women don't experience injustice equally as well. Gender justice is definitely tied to racial justice, to Indigenous justice, to disability justice, LGBTQ2SI justice, migrant justice, and so much more. And all of those things need to be part of gender equality and gender justice. And I could go on, you know, the pandemic opened up and shone a light on the things that we have been talking about that women experience disproportionately. And so here is a chance for us to do something different and ensure that women are at the front of the recovery. We keep talking about there is no recovery without a she-covery, and we can't have any kind of recovery unless women are at the center. And I'll leave it at that. It is extremely important. It is what will change this world.
Perfect, thank you. And I'll ask the same question to Cara.
Hi, thank you so much. I feel so grateful to be here, surrounded by so many amazing individuals. Marie, I echo everything you're saying. I think I go around the word equality and, you know, okay, we're pushing for equality for the genders, but what does that look like truly? And how can we protect all people? And I think also of the word safe space. So the world needs to become a safe space for all genders, you know, non-binary, trans, queer, women, to live their lives without, you know, harassment and sexual violence, which is so common. So I think that's a really important part of it. We go back to equal pay as well. However, pay is truly not equal when the majority of male-dominated jobs, say police, fire, ambulance, doctors, are paid much higher than more womenly dominated jobs like childcare, PSWs, jobs like that. So I think we throw on this word equal pay, but we need to have a whole reset of the system, I feel. I was just taking some notes while you were speaking, and I think about just dismantling the whole system. I also think about reproductive rights for, maybe those in lower income situations, and from teenagehood on. So women have the right to choose when they have children, because when you have a child, it changes your life so much and the trajectory of it. So I think reproductive rights are also a big part of gender equality. I just echo everything Marie says, and I'm excited to discuss tonight. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Cara. And Jeremy, what does gender equality, gender justice mean to you?
Thank you, Jeanette, and thank you, everyone. Maria and Cara, my goodness, going after you guys. I feel like I'm coming in from a different angle, but it's an honor to sit at this table. It's a world for me where like my little girl doesn't come home from school and say like the boys get to go at recess first, or I don't have to explain to her that there's countries in this multiple countries left on this planet where like girls don't go to school, girls don't get to do things. It's just such a backwards thing. And I like I said, I've been in not-for-profits. I've always been in not-for-profits since I left school, and it's definitely an industry dominated by women, and it's this amazing thing to suddenly step into being a father and actually see that why that is, and that inequality that exists that keeps people kind of in that same track, and my part in that, and like being like the word privilege just means such a funny thing to someone like me, and for my daughter to not to be like a middle-class white girl that's so privileged yet still so held down too. Like it just seems like such a backwards conversation to ever have to have with somebody, especially when they're just when these people are just like, they're our future, like parent or not, children are like the whole future of this planet, and everybody has such a vested interest in that. And again, what Marie and Cara said, like, how can we move forward? We can't move forward if we don't all step together. Like it just isn't something that can happen. And I'm happy to be here to be a part of this conversation.
Awesome, thank you. And it's super important that you are a part of this conversation. We can't just have women coming to the table and discussing the issues. We have to have men at the table as well. So thank you for putting yourself here. So we're going to get to the first question, and you will each have around 3 to 4 minutes to answer those questions. And so we'll start this one, we'll go backwards this time, and we'll start with Jeremy. And I'm going to ask you, when did you first understand the link to gender and inequality in family care?
I wish I could say this was something I'd seen my whole life, but until my wife was pregnant, like I don't think this was ever really something that you hear about things like the pay equity and things, but it's hard to see that when you're just working beside your colleagues, and your director, your direct report is a woman, and like it's it makes it a perspective thing. And then suddenly your wife's pregnant, and she needs to, go get an ultrasound, and how does that impact her workday versus like, well, I can't, I have a meeting, I can't go. Well, she still has to go. And, you start to see, these little, like the tiniest of little things. And then as you, progress down and suddenly like the cost, the added costs of like maternity clothing and the fashion pressures of looking good while you're pregnant, and, and keeping it all together in the workplace. My wife had to travel to India when she was about 6 months pregnant. So like even the cultural differences there, and the differences in understanding of gender equality as they are there versus here is different. And so that impact on her. But I think when it kind of hit me on at least a more macro level was when I decided, or when my wife and I decided she wanted to go back to work after 10 months of being off for maternity for a really great work opportunity. It wasn't something that would like hurt her career to not be there, but she wanted to take advantage of it. And so, you know, again, up until this point, I don't even think I knew about paternity leave and parental leave. And then suddenly it's on my radar and I was, you know, this is going to be the greatest thing in the world. And I was so excited to do it. And I remember going into my employer at the time and discussing that, you know, this was something I'd like to do for my family. And she was a woman, my boss at the time, and she laughed at me. And when I said, like, you know, this is something I'd like to do, she laughed. I fully believe she thought it was a joke in that first moment. And unfortunately, the conversation did not improve from there. I think all in one big paragraph, my career goals were questioned. My wife's ability to be a good mother was questioned. And ultimately, I took the leave and came back a by far better person for it. And I couldn't stay. I guess there was just no way that I could be treated fairly anymore, given that I was invested in my daughter's future, I guess. I'm not, you know, it's one of those weird things that for me, that was probably one of the first times probably was definitely the first time I'd ever experienced some sort of barrier like that, and where I, you know, felt like I was being talked down to because of something that was like a gender thing that had just never come across my life before. And it blew me away. And again, my privilege of having experienced that for the first time in my like early 30s, you know, like women have been experiencing this since day one, and it's just such a terrible thing. So I'm glad that I was able to experience this and have this kind of come into a personal radar for me that made it such an important thing to be a part of.
Fantastic, thank you. I will just say before we go on to the next speaker, if you do have questions, please do write them in the chat and we'll get to them as soon as we've done all of the questions. So we're going to get to those at the end. But I will ask the same question and I will repeat it, and we'll go to Cara if that's okay. And so the question again was, when did you first understand the link to gender and inequality in family care?
Being, you know, a younger person, I'm a 27-year-old female, unmarried, no children. So I go back to my experience as an ECE, but first I'll go to my upbringing. So my mother stayed home for 7 years with myself and my sister. And I think back then I didn't really understand that. I thought, oh, this is just what the mother does. Even, you know, as someone being born in the 90s, that was still common for mom to stay home for such a long length of time, where likely, you know, she passed up career opportunities, passed up salary raises for us, which I'm eternally grateful for her care during that time. But I didn't even consider, like, would the father stay home? Would the mother stay home? Nope, mom's staying home. So I guess I didn't understand it then, but that's where it started. And then I go forward to when I decided to be an early childhood educator on the floor. So I had done my bachelor's of psychology, and I wanted to work with children in the future. So I did my ECE and I was so excited because the work is amazing. Working with 0 to 5, their brains are developing, they're learning all these new skills, they're joyous to be around. I just feel blessed every day to work in a childcare center. So, you know, I was so excited. Show up to work, $15 an hour, 9-hour shifts, caring for 10 infants with 2 other people. 45-minute break a day. I started having back problems. I started becoming tired, but the work kept pushing me. However, I was met with just ignorance from my friends of saying, oh, you can do better. Like, oh, ECE, childcare. And it was honestly so disheartening. I think one of the worst comments I got was my friend's father said, what do you do all day? Change diapers? And I said, no, you know, I'm supporting infants' brains developing, I'm nurturing them, I'm caring for them. So that really punched me in the gut at 22, 23, starting my career. So that's why I wanted to move up so fast into managerial roles, and then now the ED role, because the treatment I got as an ECE was just so disheartening that I wanted to create, you know, a ECE. I wanted to be a job that people are proud of and is looked highly upon and not thought as silly work. But yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that for now, but that's my experience of gender equality to start.
Thank you. And Marie, I'll ask the question again. When did you first understand the link to gender and inequality in family care?
So funny that you asked that. I did a webinar earlier today and we talked about this very thing. I was 8 years old and I lived in Jamaica. My mother worked at the Ministry of Labor and she was traveling quite a bit. She was the permanent secretary to the minister. And so at the time she was doing a lot of UN work and had to leave Jamaica to go and do the various meetings with the Organization of American States and all of those things. And she went to my grandfather and said, my job is taking me to these places. And so every so often I'm going to need you to take care of the kids. It was my brother and myself. All my mom's other siblings had already emigrated to Canada. She was the only one left in Jamaica. And my grandfather said no. He said no because he felt that it was her responsibility. And it wasn't that he didn't think she should work. He thought that she was in a job that was not meant for a woman. The traveling, all of those, no, you're supposed to stay home and take care of your children. So I became very aware of it then because it's what caused my mother to move to Canada. It's what caused my mother actually to send us to Canada to live with my grandmother. And she realized a year later she could not be without her children. And so she came and joined. She already had her Canadian citizenship because she had gone to school in Montreal. But that was the very first. And I think after that, the next, because I think that it's important to tell these because they're different stages. So when I came to Canada, again, my grandmother was very role oriented. Boys had roles, girls had roles, boys did these chores, girls did these chores. And it came as a surprise to me at 8 years old because my mother was very different. We both had to do exactly the same things. There was no male role, there was no female role. I had to take out the garbage just like he had to take out the garbage. He had to clean the bathroom the same way I had to clean the bathroom. And if dishes needed to be done, we both had to do them. So that whole change took me for a loop. And I rebelled against that, by the way. And I think the next time was in my career. So when I went to the CLC elections, the convention where I was elected, I went to do a caucus, and I was in a predominantly a union that was predominantly women. I was in their caucus, and I was asked the question, I hear you're not moving your kids to Ottawa. Should you win? Who's going to parent them? What are they going to do? How can you dare leave your children, in a different city? And after I picked up my jaw off the ground, I turned to them and I said, my children have a father who, also has care responsibility. And beyond that, the village raises my children. And so I live in a supportive community and talked about all of those things and talked about the fact, well, we have phones, we have all kinds of other things to be able to communicate with our children on a regular basis. And by the way, men have been running for these positions forever. Have you ever asked a man that question? And it shut it down.
Awesome. It's fascinating to listen to each of your responses and hear you speaking about your first experiences coming from people that you should be trusting, your boss, your friends, your family members. Those are the people that initially told you that there's some kind of inequality going on. But it's also interesting that each one of you said, whoa, hang on a second. That doesn't fit me, right? So let's go on to the second question. And we'll start this time with Cara. And I'll ask you, what are some of the ways our systems could be changed, such as childcare, to help to balance family care?
All right, I'll take this childcare one on. So recently, the federal government has made an exciting announcement with childcare, changing it into a national framework system where it's publicly funded $10 a day care. So the current model of care, parent fees and government funds make up our profits. So we pay our educators from parent fees and government funds. Our educators still are making $14 to $20 an hour. Parent fees are sky high. In Toronto, they're up to $1,800 a month for infant care. So there's just such a disparity, and it's so expensive, but the staff don't make enough. So with the creation of the national framework, I am looking for quality. I'm looking for childcare to become a career that people stay in and grow in, similar to that of teaching, nursing, any other career that people want to be a part of for their whole lives. Currently, it's such a precarious career. People stay for 3 to 5 years and then leave the field. And that's really because of public perception. As I stated in my last question, the public perception of childcare is not good. People don't see it as, real, true hard work. And that is likely because it's historically been women's work. So it's not seen as a true career path because historically women have done it. So I'm really excited with the changes coming with the national framework, more two parents working and needing childcare. But my dream system is, it's just like school where you sign up for childcare at 18 months and you get enrolled and it's free or $10 a day. And, the staff are well paid, well respected and nourished, because that's going to provide such a better quality of care than staff like me who's tired, burnt out, not making enough. Some are working 2 jobs. So I am excited for the future, but hesitant. There's my answer for that one.
And I think, given what's happened with the pandemic and, parents and other people stepping in to help with childcare, you must be seeing, more people being so thankful for childcare because it is so necessary and it is such hard work. So you must be seeing people acknowledging it more than they have done in the past.
Yeah, definitely. And I see, I think, I don't know the exact stat, but many mothers had to leave the workforce because childcare was closed for a period of time. And then, people were still nervous about COVID, so they kept their children home. But yes, even having 1 or 2 children at home, they're not happy either being home. They want to be engaged with their peers in quality early learning while mom or dad or parent is at the computer working. You can imagine if I had a 2-year-old next to me, I would not be able to be engaged with you like I am right now. So definitely people are realizing it. We've been fighting for this for decades. I'm so excited to be a part of this movement, but yes, we just have to keep pushing the federal and provincial government to get to that national framework.
Definitely sounds like good things are coming. We need that. So let's move on to Marie. I'll ask the same question. I'll repeat it for you. What are some ways our systems could be changed, such as childcare, to help balance family care? Obviously, doesn't have to be linked to childcare.
Well, I think that the first thing that needs to happen is that we have to establish a right to care in this country. Children, families, the elderly, people with disabilities should all have the right to the care that they need to live with dignity, the care that they need to grow, to learn, to participate in the workforce and in their community. And when we make care a right, then the state at all levels is obligated to realize that right. And then I think we will, we would have arrived. And that means providing universal access to high quality care services, not the floor of anything. We want the ceiling, whether it's childcare, home care, long-term care, or other forms of healthcare. We have depended on the unpaid labor of family caregivers for far too long, all, for the most part, women. So we need not just to provide different forms of care, but we also have to make sure that this care is of high quality, and that means providing decent work for the care workers. It means better wages, job stability, healthy and safe working conditions, opportunities for training and professional development. All of these things have a direct impact on the quality of care that people receive. The other thing, the way in which ECEs are looked at. I'm also an ECE, Cara, and I was the first cohort of the apprenticeship program. And again, treating the two programs in a similar way, because prior to that, apprenticeships were only construction trades and trades that were, male dominated. And so at least that was a start, but they didn't take that any further. So we need to all have all of those things. And unfortunately, the consequences of, the work not being seen as decent work in terms of the care economy has been devastating. And this has definitely been demonstrated during COVID with the epidemic, because it is an epidemic in long-term care. The human cost of austerity, precarity of work has also been steep, because all of these jobs in the care economy are always also precarious jobs for the most part. Care systems, again, really need to be publicly funded, publicly managed, publicly delivered. And until now, Canada has seen care as a commodity. And our market-based approach has meant considerable inequities in access, in affordability, and in quality. And so we need to change that. People really need to have access to care that they need, regardless of where they live, what kind of work they do, how much money they have. It needs to be something that is available to all. And we have a chance now. I think we're in a really good spot now to turn the tide with the recent budget commitments on childcare. And as long as the government follows through with the legislation that enshrines the key principles into their agreements with the provinces and territories, I think we'll be good. We have been here before. We have been here before with the promise of childcare, and I know that all too well. While I was executive vice president and responsible, we had the government say, yes, Marie, we're making this announcement. And I said, we should do it together. And so we had a reception with the press there, waiting for the announcement. And we heard birds chirping. So we've been here before. We need to make sure that they follow through. We also need standards for long-term care. That is extremely important. The two parts of our population, the youngest and the eldest, that need the care, really need to have things change. And one of the things the labor movement has called for is a task force or a commission on care work and care jobs, which I think would study, design, and implement a care strategy for Canada. In addition to these specific initiatives on childcare and long-term care, we think a deeper dive into the issue of paid and unpaid care work and the development of a labor market strategy for quality care jobs is an important part of ensuring an equitable future for work, as well as access to care service for everybody who needs it. It can't just be available to some and not others. And if given the chance, I'll talk a little bit about our Done Waiting campaign a little bit later.
Fantastic. Jeremy, I'll repeat the question. What are some ways our systems could be changed, such as childcare, to help balance family care?
That's a great question. And I feel a little green coming in with like the systems change stuff, especially next to Maria here and Cara. Like, wow, those are amazing progressive answers. I think like what I see are like I see two big problems here, or two things that just don't make sense to me. The first is like we should be putting our money where our mouths are. I mean, we pay rock stars and football players and musicians like millions and millions of dollars. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, except that, we're paying the people that are producing the future of our planet. Like Cara said, like $15 an hour. I mean, that's like minimum wage. It doesn't even make sense on any level. And it's such a block in my mind that I really struggle with it. I don't, like I see, I work in a not-for-profit. If we want to do something big, we have to get sponsorships. We have to get people to like give us money to do these things. And then, if I'm a good musician, I can just sing and dance for my whole life. And I know that's this is a career too, and there's skill involved in this. But again, it's like the future of our entire plan is put behind people that are, they're educated, they're skilled, they're at risk. Like one of the amazing women that took care of my daughter at our daycare, which was an amazing place. I loved it. She, like, her leg was broken by a young, like a little boy. And she said, he's just a little guy acting out, but like she didn't get any sort of compensation. They wouldn't address it with the parents. There's like her value was so minimal to keeping people having a good reputation, and that this childcare is safe, and that these things don't happen, that like she basically was off for the better part of a year trying to rehab herself without proper support. Or she was guaranteed her job back, thank goodness, but like does that need to be said? It's just seems like such a funny thing. The other part of it for me is, and this is something that I think I've seen through COVID, but again, childcare is so important, kind of like medicine, or and these are essential services, except that childcare isn't. And I feel like it should be something that the government stands behind and says, like, this is so important that it will always be available. And I don't want to try to even repeat what the other two have already said, but I just really think that there's a lot of talk at a lot of levels about the importance of kids and how important their futures are. But then we just don't see any sort of backing behind that, besides, kind of the call at election day of promises that are broken and things like that. So, that is, I think that those are two places from my limited view that I think are a good start to kind of at least share in an arena where people like myself aren't quite so knowledgeable about the topic, but can understand that, these are big, like, easy apples to bite that should be talked about more frequently by everybody.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Yep. I'm going to move on to the next question, but I know I could see Cara feverishly writing notes. So we'll probably come back to some stuff once we've got through all of the questions. But I'll go on to question 3. And Marie, I'll start with you this time. What is one thing we could all do to make a difference?
I'll give you 2. Talk to your decision makers and tell your stories. Jeremy, what you just said, you know better than anybody else what your experience is. I can't talk about your experience. Your experience is what's going to make the difference. You asked me for one thing, and so tell your stories. That is the one thing, and tell your stories to all levels of governments and anybody who will listen, because then you'll realize that other people may share the same story. Your story could be the one that makes a difference to that politician who you think has a stone heart. And not only that, try and put yourself where they are and speak from their perspective. So I often tell people, put yourself in somebody else's shoes, and I tell them that too. So see where they're coming from and ask them, tell them that they need to understand, because they probably have, if they don't have kids, they may have grandchildren, nieces, nephews, neighbors that have children. And so remind them, if it's an older couple, remind them of, what it was like when they were a parent. If it's a younger politician, talk to them about what it is like to be a parent, and ask them about their experiences. Stories make a difference. And now is the time to do that. Now is the time to seize that opportunity. And we need to make sure that when we're telling these stories and fighting for whatever it is we're fighting for, that we do it in a way that nobody is left behind and everybody is at the table at the very beginning of the process.
I think coming out of this pandemic, we are going to have some stories, right? And we need to see everybody's perspective. Let's go to Cara. And the question was, what is one thing we could all do to make a difference?
I wrote immediately, speak up when it's uncomfortable. So, you know, I've been fighting this childcare fight for years. I'm only 27, but, you know, I'm still going. But, you know, I felt uncomfortable when my friends would say, oh, you're in childcare. Like, they literally would go, you can do better. I'm like, well, what's more important than like children? Like, what's more important than our future? And it just never made sense to me. So I kept talking about it and I kept moving up in my career. And now as an ED running an advocacy group, I'm so happy I didn't back down and I didn't go, oh, they're right. Maybe I'll switch careers, or, oh, like that's true, because I knew it wasn't true. It's not. So going from that to most recently, I met with Stephen Lecce, the Minister of Education. Tomorrow I'm meeting with the Federal Government Finance Committee, because I didn't stop speaking up when I felt uncomfortable. So yeah. And Jeremy, I thank you for, you know, you say you're green, but I think the majority of parents need to know about childcare. And I just imagine my friends who are men becoming fathers and learning about it too. And having, you know, I can be an expert sitting at a table, but the general population needs to know about childcare and why it's so important. And, you know, sometimes it feels like I'm just repeating myself, but I don't think so, because the message isn't clear yet. So I'm going to keep talking, even though it might make someone uncomfortable. So that's my advice.
Absolutely. And we need that. We need people to advocate, people that understand the systems, but they're advocating for the people that are living the stories, right? So yeah, absolutely. Jeremy, what's the one thing that we can all do to make a difference?
I'm definitely echoing Marie here. I think that you know, I think more men, like I'm seeing men walking down the road pushing baby carriages like in the middle of the day in pre-COVID. Like everybody's doing that during COVID, but pre-COVID, you know, that like obviously they were taking the time to be at home with their family, and I think that specifically for men, like men need to do this and then share that with men. It is it's something that there's this barrier inside of us that there's something about being tough, and like I have never ever felt more vulnerable but more strong than like when I was holding my daughter and my wife was on a work trip and she, you know, my daughter's throwing up on me and crying and I'm crying and I don't know what to do and it's 4 a.m. and I don't have anyone to call, and you know, like those are the moments that, you know, I think they're terrifying until you just as a man, you know, you come through this and you're like, wow, okay, you know, one more step, we got this, we can do this. And like those are the greatest moments that like in my memory, you know, like I think, you know, marrying my wife, having a child and being a part of their lives is like the most valuable thing that could ever have happened to me. And for me to not share that, and for me to like it frustrates me so much when I'm sitting down with my you know, my boys and they're like, oh, you know, and it's like, that's, you know, that's her job. And like, they're joking, like they're good friends. I know these guys and they're, you know, they're good dads, but that joke still exists. Like it's still there and it still needs to be broken down. And I think it's just that perception. It needs to just keep happening. And, you know, I'm seeing guys with man buns and we're all walking around baby carriages now trying to, you know, fill that. But I think it's important that we keep sharing those stories so more people can know, because it's a challenge that had I missed it, I would never know what I missed. And it's the best thing I've ever done.
Awesome. There's some great responses there. I saw that you were making some notes. So if you have things to add from any of the other questions, then please feel free. I can see both Marie and Cara nodding. So Marie, do you want to add something?
Yeah, a couple of things. You know, one of the things that the labor movement also does is show, put on show the inequity. And I remember a number of years ago, there was a strike at 2 childcare centers. And when you when they did the comparators around, they were asking for a raise in salary and so on and so forth. And when you did those comparators, you saw that parking lot attendance and zoo attendance. Now, I'm not disparaging on animals. I'm not an animal hater or anything like that. But as people keep saying, our children are our future. And when you see that zookeepers, parking lot attendants were making more money per hour than ECEs and childcare workers, like, that tells you something about what what the priorities are in society. When you see care workers, the people who take care of us, to help us to be able to do the work that we do every single day, are being treated less than. Even during COVID, you saw, we thought, finally, they're seeing what it is that workers do, that care workers do. And, pandemic pay came in, 24-hour childcare in Toronto came in, like all of these, and personal protective equipment, all of those things. And the minute they realized they didn't have to do it anymore, they took them away. But they had the resources to make it happen. And that's where we need to be, not where we are now. But back then, where you were getting all the respect and dignity that you deserved as a care worker. So yeah, there were a number of things I wanted to jump into. And again, just to go back to starting and telling stories from where you are, I can't wait to see the type of parent that my son will become. My sons, one is about to become a father in 3 months. So making me a grandma for the first time. I am dying to see what kind of parent he will be based on the things that I've taught him and based on what I've seen, and he is 100% in to everything about this pregnancy and this baby coming. And I'm hoping that this generation will make those changes that we so desperately need to, show the world that care is right up there, if not more important than whatever you think the most important job is.
I will encourage anyone that has questions to pop them in the chat box. And while you're doing that, we'll move on to Cara's notes.
No, I was just inspired while we were talking. I have a few key points I want to focus on. So we think about care workers being the backbone and kind of the foundation. And my theory and hypothesis as to why it's not valued is, childcare and elderly in homes aren't technically making money in a capitalist system. So someone working as a lawyer, a police officer, a firefighter, they're making money for the economy, a business person. But, a child in a childcare isn't, it sounds so weird to say it's making money, and an old person in an elderly home isn't making money. So we are in a capitalist society. So I think that is one of the biggest issues of supporting our care work. So I agree with Marie, the first thing we have to do is invest in the care, in care workers, and make it just a part of the fabric of society, like a guarantee. Like when I turn 80 and I need to go in an old elderly home, I will go and I won't have to pay. Or before that, when I have a child and I want them to go to childcare at 18 months, they will go, and it will be quality. And it just should be a guarantee, regardless of political lines or regardless of a conservative in power or liberal. So I definitely, that's what I hope for the future. And when Jeremy was talking, I was thinking a lot about toxic masculinity, and, not to put you on the spot, but I think about like when your friends are saying things like, oh, like they're trying to be that tough guy attitude. Like, do you find it's hard to like go against that? Like, are you uncomfortable, or do you find yourself like trying to encourage, like, no, it's cool to be caring and loving. Like, it's awesome.
Yeah, no problem at all. So I mean, I think you said it before, like, it's uncomfortable to kind of stand out against the crowd, but no, I personally am very, very content to tell people that this is the greatest journey I've ever been on, and that a lack of experience does not mean that anybody knows what they're speaking about. And so no, I do my best to speak my truth, but you know, I feel like maybe my voice isn't loud enough sometimes.
And something jumped out at me, Jeremy, you know, when you were saying, you know, how cool it was for, you know, the guys to walk down the street with their stroller and their man buns. And that's fantastic. It needs now not to be cool. It needs to be necessary. And if you're going to do that, you need to be a part of the conversation, right? You are a part of this. If you're the cool one walking down the street with your stroller and your man bun, then you need to be the cool one to speak up. You need to be the cool one to advocate. Yeah, that's for sure. That's what we need. I think I've seen saw something come into the chat box, so I'm just gonna look.
While you're doing that, Jeanette, I'm just going to jump in. In terms of being the cool one, if we start talking about all these things when the kids are in school, you know, giving the example, but not just giving the example, talking about it, doing both at the same time, I think that also creates the changes that we need. Oftentimes, you know, I used to spend a lot of time on the basketball court. Both my boys are ball players. And that's where I did a lot of my political education with the kids on the court. You know, that's where they were, that's where you could find them. So we would talk about, you know, these are elections, and they would say, well, there's no need to vote. We don't need, and I would talk to them about the importance of that. You see this basketball court that you're playing on? You keep complaining that the hoops are broken, that there are no seats, that's what elections do. That's what politics is about. And that got them interested, because I started from where they were. And we need to do the same thing with childcare. Same thing with childcare, because everybody has a story to tell with childcare.
Marie, I think that, I'm sorry, I would love to jump in here. I feel like that's such a good truth. You know, it reminds me of when I was, you know, like 5 and I'm coming home from school and the teachers loaded us up with, go home and tell your parents smoking is bad, because it was so ingrained in the culture. I mean, doctors were smoking and it was just such a normal thing. But, you know, we got to do this at the level of the people that are still growing and learning. And if, like, my daughter doesn't have to hear that she can't do things and can't be things. It doesn't have to be put, you know, in the girls group to do coloring and draw pictures of ponies versus like the boys playing with action figures. I mean, my daughter can smash action figures just as good as any boy I've ever seen. And I think that you're so right about that. Like, we really need to it needs to start at the bottom, and well, no, that's not true. It needs kind of all angles, but, you know, we'll win this war by having the tide come and just overwhelm anything that's left by the end of it.
Mm-hmm. And developmentally, why are we separating girls and boys in elementary school when we're doing physical activities? Why is that so? I know just from my daughter's perspective, she would do ball throw and you know, all of the athletics things, that 100 meters and the long jump and the high jump. And she could care less whether she was beating the girls. She wanted to beat the boys. And it was frustrating because they were separated and she needed to know how the boys were doing because she wanted to beat them. And so, you know, it lends to the question, why are they even being separated? Developmentally, are they, then they're not that different in elementary school. Throw that out there. But Jordan popped in the comments, governments don't want to invest in childcare, but they also want millennials to have children to secure the future workforce for our capitalist societies.
I mean, yes, that is an interesting point. I know, as an anti-capitalist over here, a proud socialist, I'd love to abolish the whole system, but yeah, a lot of millennials aren't having children. They're having dogs, they're not getting married. But again, I think it still needs to be a personal choice of whether you have children, like I said before. And I believe if you choose to have them, though, you should be supported by, you know, the government, childcare, and into school and beyond. So interesting comment there.
Because I don't know if there are any other comments, but shut me up if you want to, Jeanette. A story, again, another story that wasn't original, and I don't usually use this story to talk about gender issues. I use the story usually to talk about race because of what I did with it. But there is a gender component in that when my eldest son, who is now 32, was about 3 or 4, he was probably about 4. He was at childcare, and my kids went to a home daycare that was part of the public system, and I came to pick them up one evening, and the childcare provider said to me, "Marie, can I just have a word with you before you go to pick up the kids, because there was an incident today." So I, got all thinking that one of them was hurt or something. And she said, "No, this is what happened. So Mr. Christie, the cookie company, used to make these cookies. And there were 2 different kinds. It was like witches and princesses or Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that. So all the good cookies, so the so-called good cookies, the knights, the princess, the queen, the king, were all vanilla cookies. And the dragons and all the things that were the negatives in these stories were the bad, were the bad character cookies. Those were the chocolate ones. And they went to play, and my child wanted to be, they were playing Dungeons and Dragons or whatever the thing is, and wanted to be the dragon. And no, he wanted to be the knight. And one of the other kids said, no, you have to be the dragon. You're brown. You have to be the dragon. The dragons are brown. And then, so they did that for a while. And then the little girl said, well, no, I want to be the dragon now. I want to be, Ryan's had enough of that. It's my turn. And the other little boy said, no, you have to be the princess. Right. And she's like, no, I want to be the dragon. And so they wanted to tell me that story because it shows you that things that you don't even think make a difference to kids really do. This child who will remain unnamed, his mother said that she never even thought about that when she bought and yeah, she had those cookies. And so, there's other story about trying to get the supermarkets to take the cookies off the shelves and stuff like that. But kids learn from every little thing that we do and every little thing that is around them. And so if we start to teach them all of these things from a really young age and show them and model the behaviors, that we want government to act on, I think that's where we need to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to jump in and talk about in childcare. We talk a lot about emotions because, as you know, the little ones have big emotions to deal with. And, I maybe 20 years ago will be labeled, oh, don't be a sissy, buck up. But obviously now it's the boys need hugs too. The boys are crying, and we don't say, oh, put your tears away. We say, okay, it's okay to cry, hug them. And we talk about their feelings, where even, in my time, it was still, boys are tough, like, oh, you're going to be just fine, be a man. But I personally, I think that language is coming out of style. But I'm curious, Jeremy, you're talking about your girls still being divided from the boys in elementary school. So that's still happening.
Yes, some feedback there. I definitely don't, I don't want to say that in a way that I think that there's any sort of like intention there, of course. But, she comes home and, where it got me was we were trying to, oh, it still makes me so angry. I was so upset. So it was when she was going into grade 1, I believe, from kindergarten. So there was a group of 4 boys in the class, and then there was a group of 4 girls in the class. It was a very small class, and it was, the best thing ever. Like, who's heard of like a 10-person class? And I wanted, so I asked the principal if she could, help have my daughter go in one direction with a certain teacher and stay with some of her friends. Like parents are, all advocating for their kids. But what I was told was that, well, the boys need to stay together. It's very important for the boys. And you know what, Cara, I didn't speak up properly. I should have lost it. I couldn't believe it. And I mean, you can tell, like, I get shaky when I think about it, because I remember just being so blown away that these boys, for whatever reason, and maybe it was like I can't come up with a good reason, but maybe there was one. And, I want to be hopeful in people, but my goodness, I couldn't believe that someone could say something like that. And unfortunately, the person that said it was a woman. Like, it catches me when things like that happen. And I think, what Maria said about, how it's coming from youth and from childhood, and it's those norms about, what people see and what they're raised into. My daughter feels that way, like that boys, they get to go first, they get to run out faster because they're faster, they're more rambunctious, or, and it's it's a hard thing to wrap our head around, but I see the progress in it too. Like, I see that those barriers are being broken down, and my daughter Chloe is an amazing teacher right now that's really kind of all about not having that type of thing taking place in the classroom. And it's really unfortunate that the classroom is my living room table these days, because we're not getting the benefit of such an amazing educator. But yeah, it's sad to still see it, and it's sad to see it being put on children at such a young age, where I liken it to the things that I learned as a kid. They're my religion today. Like, you don't unlearn the things your parents tell you as a child. They are the things that you have a conscience about as an adult. And it's why we just have to be so careful with these little minds. They're so important.
Very much so.
I think it's Linda. I think that what you have been saying is so amazing. I love, Marie, what you've said about the storytelling. Jeremy, you're exemplifying that with sharing some of your stories. I had the good fortune of traveling around Ontario, and it was about closing the gender wage gap with the government. But the reality was, it was still the experiences that we heard while we were doing it, and some of the things that we're hoping will change, not just with children, but with adults too, and the way that they look at parenting. And so, hearing your story, Jeremy, about taking the parental leave and the backlash that you received, we heard that too when we did our talks around the province, that some women were really mistrustful of men taking parental leave, and male coworkers, saying that they didn't really believe that the children were going to get good care. And so I really hope that, we need to work on the acceptance of, changing how we condition children, or we react or treat the children, and hopefully not brainwashing them, but also each other. A speaker I heard that said she was doing an engagement, and she thought she was going to be able to make it home to get her daughter dressed and come to the speaking engagement. And she ran out of time. She called her husband. She said, "I'm not going to have time to get home. Can you dress our daughter and bring her to the event?" And she said, "That's your father. He can do it, right? He's got the tools." And she said jokingly, when he came, the little girl had her dress on backwards, and that was okay. She said, like he didn't get it right, but he did it. She had clothes on. And so we have to, as individuals, be welcoming and be hopeful, and try to change those attitudes of no, you can't do this right, and we can't give you the opportunity. So I know that some of our other guests maybe, and I think Danny maybe has some comments, and so maybe we can get somebody else to jump in and say what they're thinking.
Yeah, I would say when we first launched the coalition, our first interview was with somebody from Bell Media, and he was talking. He was really excited about interviewing us about Bell Media, but he shared his paternity story. And when he went to Bell Media and said, "Hey, I'm going on paternity leave," they laughed at him and said, "You're going to ruin your career if you do it." And he said, "What?" And they said, "Men just don't do it. Like, you're going to be locked out of the industry. You're on this. And if you do it, you're always going to be." And so, he got support from the union and they fought it, but like he said he could feel his career stalling because of it, and we've heard it over and over and over since we started the coalition. And it's sort of shameful. And when we started the coalition, we tended to engage men and hear their stories, but I didn't expect to hear those stories about paternity leave so much. Like I just didn't know. And I think that's part about it, right? Like we need Jeremy to tell his stories. We need to hear folks' stories. So I also want to share a little personal story, and Amanda just turned her camera on. So I make Amanda tell this story every time, but Amanda won a accommodation for childcare with Fanshawe. Amanda and OPSU won an accommodation, and we just got accommodation with my husband. My youngest child has a mental health and he's 14 and he needs to be accommodated. All we wanted was my husband to switch his shift from 9 to 5 to 7 to 3 so that he could be home when the kid got off the bus. And so I work from home. I'm very privileged. I work at United Way with Jeremy. Both Jeremy and I are very lucky. Our employers let us take care of our kids when things go a bit haywire. But the employer, Bill's employer, he works for a hospital. I won't name the hospital because of issues, but he doesn't work in London. And so if you know where I'm out of, you'll know what hospital he works for. And the hospital sent an accommodation letter to my employer that said, assuming you're accommodating her and he works in skilled trades at the hospital, don't you think that she can handle the childcare for her 14-year-old son? Literally wrote it in the paperwork. And so my feminist boss lost her mind, sent it to the lawyer, sent it to everybody she could find it. She's like very upset. And I'm like, they have the right to ask. Like they did not breaking any rules. It's disgusting. And I hope they don't accommodate me so we can take them to, we can take it further, but they did accommodate us. Her answers were hilarious and were right on point. We also sent them to the psychiatrist who answered the questions like, well, if we can cure mental health, then I'm sure things will be fine. But it's disgusting. This is a hospital that treats mental health patients in Ontario, and wanted my skilled trades husband not to have to be accommodated to take care of his child because his wife, who works in social work, should just be able to take care of the child care. So I just share my story. And thanks Amanda for paving the way so we have cases.
Maybe
Sure.
Amanda, do you want to elaborate a little more on the case that Danny's talking about?
Sure. I was also going to tell just a quick story because, I've really found this panel to be insightful, but I had an experience when I was completing my PhD. So I completed my PhD in sociology, and as everyone knows, girls are now outperforming boys in terms of academia, but not at the highest level of education. And that's often because when we get into the high levels of education, we start to think that our biological clock is ticking. And so we don't have time to complete higher education. So long story short, I came from a very poor upbringing. My parents divorced when I was very young, and both my parents were alcoholics and drug addicts. And so I had a really difficult childhood, and I managed to overcome and get myself into university and succeed and do well. And I did so well that when I was completing my PhD, I got an award called SHIRK, which was a lot of money. Long story short, I decided before I completed my PhD to have a child. And I'll never, ever forget the reaction that I got from the other professors in my department. I wasn't a professor at the time, I was a student, but they looked at me and they said, what a waste, what a shame. Cara, I know. So they said, basically they looked at me and they told me, like, without a shadow of a doubt, that they were disappointed that I had received those high academic accolades and awards and scholarship funding and money, and that basically my choice to have a child was going to flush those down the toilet. And so then I decided, because, if you got to know me, you'd know that I do everything possible to fight against these systems. So in a move that no one could have predicted, I decided to buck the entire system. And with opportunities being presented to me at the university level, I decided basically to say, I'm not going to pursue that realm. I'm going to work out of college instead of the university, because I don't want to be involved in this toxic environment, and I don't want this undue pressure. I think family is important. So my decision to teach at the college rather than the university was a decision because I wanted to put my children and my family first, and I thought I couldn't do so in that toxic world of academia. So then I went to Fanshawe, and I found a new reality where I had to fight in order to be accommodated, to allow a scheduling accommodation, because my husband owns a small business and he wasn't available when my children were small. So I asked the college to accommodate my schedule, and they said, no, we don't accommodate on the basis of family status. And they told the wrong person no, because I happen to teach gender inequality. And so it was a really, really long process. It started in around 2007, and I think went for 10 years. And by the time that they were finally found, as discriminating against the Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms. That was the finding against the college. And by the time that happened, my children were both of the age that they no longer needed childcare. So that was my story, or my experience with both systems. And so I thought back to both experiences as I heard the panel speaking. So thank you so much for that tonight.
That's great. I don't know if anybody else on the call tonight would like to offer comments or questions. Just unmute yourself if you would like to speak, and we can hear from you. Otherwise, I'll turn it back to you, Jeanette.
I was going to say, if nobody, I'll talk a little bit about our Done Waiting campaign, which I didn't talk about at the very beginning, just so that people can see the connectedness. Host Jeanette, I jumped in.
No, yes, no, go for it.
So the Canadian Labour Congress for decades have been dealing with issues around women's equality, campaigns on childcare, campaigns on everything you could imagine, pay equity. And so we decided to put everything together, and we just ran a Done Waiting campaign. We wanted to show the connections between the different issues. We wanted to expose the different impacts on different groups of women. And we wanted to center the solutions that would make a difference to the most marginalized people. So we also wanted to create a sense of urgency, of frustration, of exasperation at the lack of meaningful progress on many of the key challenges, hence the slogan, we're done waiting. And it wasn't just, we are done waiting. And we would end our things with done waiting, mic drop, basically. So we called for action in 4 areas: the end to wage discrimination, fixing of the childcare crisis, and an end to sexual harassment and violence. That's what we started with. And in doing all of that, people saw the connectedness, and then we added a 4th, making work fair for women. Because again, we've talked about caregivers, et cetera. And if they're not treated in a way that is, with respect and dignity, then it doesn't, none of these other things matter. And so we really, really pushed this campaign. We pushed this campaign locally, provincially, federally, and it went international. And in 3 years, I think we have achieved a whole lot. We still have to go really, really far to achieve gender justice, but we have been able to get action on childcare, action on pay equity, action on violence and harassment. We're hoping that Canada will ratify Convention 190. So we've been able to push, and it happened because we all work together, and not just women, but men as well, because all of these things impact the family. It's not a women's issue. We've been dealing with this all different, right? All these things were considered women's issues. These are not women's issues. These are community issues, family issues, economic issues, and we needed to show that they were all linked. And so I'm really, really proud of this campaign, and I encourage folks to go on the website. I think Danny posted, it's donewaiting.ca, plain and simple, hashtag donewaiting.ca. We have a Facebook page. Just go on and take a look at the documentation that's there and the campaign material and use it. Take it, use it in the community, use it in the schools, anywhere you need to use it, because we need to make this happen, and we need to make these things happen in our lifetime.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yep, definitely. And as you say, Marie, it's not just a women's issue. It's everybody's problem. We all have to step up. Are there any more questions?
I just want to say that I think these collective movements really do get a lot of traction. I know that the Me Too movement, for instance, has, I was at the United Nations for the Commission on the Status of Women back in 2019, and the World Bank is working with other groups, and they're working with the women's empowerment principles and things. And they announced that at the senior multinational companies, senior management, that they will now, or because of the Me Too movement, you can't step into those roles without signing now agreements that if you are found, or if you are even accused of any of these human rights issues, that all bets are off. Like, you lose all those contracts, all that retirement. So they're not going to be paying big bucks just to get somebody out of their company anymore. They're making them sign these memos of understanding and whatever contracts. And so it's becoming part of, if you want to get to that level, you need to pay attention. And so those movements, like you say, Marie, we all speak together, we hear the voice, it becomes united, it gains that momentum, and things really do change and make a difference. So I think it's what we need to do. We need to keep telling our stories and making sure that we're being heard, and making safe spaces like this where people can tell their stories. And I thank everybody tonight for sharing those very personal, very intimate stories. Thank you all for being so brave and doing that. And I'll shut up now and let somebody else jump in.
No, thank you so much for having me. And I definitely want to come to future meetings, and I'm excited to continue this work. And I'm on the donewaiting.ca, and I'm excited. I feel like, we work together and more things can happen. So thank you for inviting me.
And the done waiting stuff is really beautiful too. So I have, as a gift, I got the posters mounted after I spoke, but they're just beautiful. Yeah.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah, they're very artistic.
Yeah.
Very nice. So in closing and wrapping up, Jeanette, anything you or Marie or Cara, Jeremy would like to say in the last couple minutes that we have?
I think the discussion has been fabulous. I think it's really wonderful. We have some strong people stepping up and advocating for women, for parents, for parenting, for children. So thank you for doing that. It's important work, it's necessary work, and thank you. Yeah.
I just want to say that now is the time to seize the opportunity. We have to strengthen our social safety nets to ensure that nobody is left behind as we move forward. This means investment in care, childcare, long-term care, health care. It means better jobs with good pay, with good benefits, in order to disaster-proof this country. And I, again, encourage everyone to visit donewaiting.ca and canadianplan.ca. That shows exactly how we're going to get there. And the only way to do it is together.
Thank you very much for having me. I feel humbled to have even been a part of this conversation. I feel very positive about the future of it, listening to the good work that's being done. So thank you for the battles you guys are fighting.
Amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all tonight. We will definitely put you on our distribution list, and so hopefully you can join us for some of our future events, if not all of them. And thank you to our audience tonight for attending. We are so pleased that you have come yet again. Many of you have joined us before, and so we are very, very pleased to see you back on our call. And we will be meeting. So our meeting for next month is going to be Jeff Pereira, and he will be speaking about manhood, I believe is the topic. And that is on June the 17th. So,
Yes, Jeff Pereira talks about toxic masculinity, and he talks about it sort of, he's very direct about it and talks about it in a way he talks to men about with no shame. And so I'm really excited about it. It's not our normal format, and OPSU is sponsoring the event. We don't often pay for speakers, and so we're paying for him to come. I'm really excited to have him come speak. So.
yeah, so once again, it'll be a free event for everybody on Zoom, and we will make sure that you get that invitation through our constant contact process. As long as your email doesn't throw it into the junk mail, you should get that invitation. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful evening.